Welcome back to This is a Commander channel, where this is a Commander channel, and today I'm going to be talking about Commander, tough rules, and cool interactions, episode 155. Today's episode is going to take a look at replacement effects, something that I've covered a lot on this channel, but not in a while. I haven't covered it a lot lately. And last week, I know that I said that I would get to part 2 of the restrictions and requirements stuff. However, I had a lot of things come up today over the last couple days, and I just haven't had the time to finish that longer episode. So today, something that is a bit shorter, but don't interpret that as it being easier. So let's jump straight in. Ulamog, the Defiler, is one of the more powerful creatures that we got this year, and he has 4 abilities, and they are: when you cast this spell, target opponent exiles the top half of their library, rounded down. He has a ward of sacrifice 2 permanents. He enters with a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the greatest mana value among cards in Exile. And finally, he has Annihilator X, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters on it. So the more obvious way to run this Ulamog, how a lot of people build it, is that you get as many cards into Exile as possible so that you have a high chance of there being a high mana value card in there, so that he has a very high Annihilator. Now, some people like to run cards like Echoes of Eternity and the Abstruse Archaic, I believe that's how it's pronounced, in order to get more of his cast trigger of exiling half an opponent's library. But be careful with a card like Roaming Throne and a card like Panharmonicon. The Throne will give you an additional Annihilator trigger as well as an additional ward trigger, but it will not give you an additional cast trigger, nor will it cause it to enter the battlefield with a double of that enters effect of the number of counters that it comes in with. Similarly, the Panharmonicon will not impact the Ulamog in any way because it is a replacement effect for how it enters the battlefield with counters, not a triggered ability. We know that it is a replacement effect when we take a look at the comprehensive rules and head over to section 614.1c that says, effects that read this permanent enters with, as this permanent enters, or this permanent enters as, are replacement effects. Plain and simple. So now onto the real reason that I made this episode, not those little bits and pieces about Panharmonicon and such. The real reason. A little trick that you can do with that replacement effect for how he enters with counters. For this, we will need to take a look at CR 614.12 that says, some replacement effects modify how a permanent enters the battlefield. Such effects may come from the permanent itself if they affect only that permanent. They may also come from other sources. To determine which replacement effects apply and how they apply, check the characteristics of the permanent as it would exist on the battlefield, taking into account replacement effects that have already modified how it enters the battlefield. There's a little bit more after that, but not crucial to this episode. So that little detail there of check the characteristics of the permanent as it would exist on the battlefield, that means that the replacement effect looks forward in time. Before the Ulamog enters the battlefield, its replacement effect for Ulamog as to how it enters with a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the greatest mana value among cards in Exile. It will look forward in time and see the state of the game and how it looks once it's actually on the battlefield. More often than not, it will be something else that you have exiled, likely from his own cast trigger. But what happens if you were to use something like Conjurers Closet, which is an artifact that says, at the beginning of your end step, you may exile target creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under your control. So even though you're not casting the Ulamog for it to now re-entering, it is still re-entering the battlefield, and it has that replacement effect for how it will enter. And while it's still in exile from the Closet's effect, it will look forward in time to see itself on the battlefield and what the current state of the battlefield and the rest of the game is. And while it's doing that, currently in exile, to determine the highest mana value, there will be an Ulamog the Defiler sitting in exile with its mana value of 10. This means that when it comes back onto the battlefield from that Closet's effect, it will enter with 10 +1/+1 counters on it, being a 17/17 that has Annihilator 10. It's pretty crazy to me that the Closet doesn't even show up at all on the EDHREC page for this Ulamog, despite there being other creatures in the build with pretty solid ETB effects. We do see the card Eldrazi Confluence, in which one of the modes is a flicker effect, but it doesn't show up all that often. I also never see this Ulamog show up in Blink or Flicker deck lists, and if you look at the Blink tag page on EDHREC, this Ulamog doesn't show up at all, which I always thought was a bit of a bummer because I'd love to see someone pull this off in a game. Anyhow, that's all I've got for today's episode. As always, I hope that all of you have found this video to be entertaining at least, and I hope that a few of you have even learned something about the crazy rules in this great game of Magic. Have a good one. Ta-ta. And again, I apologize for the shorter episode, but a lot of stuff going on right now. It's raining, so hopefully this sound of the rain doesn't come through on the video too much. And then later today, Stalker 2 comes out, and I'm going to be addicted to that, so I don't even know what I'm going to do for next week's episode. Hopefully I can find some time to set aside my Stalker addiction and make another video for you guys. So, yeah, maybe we'll get the restrictions and requirements episode out then. Hope you guys enjoy this. For the people that stick around for these, I always do this. I drone on. All right, we're cutting it. We're cutting it. Killing it.